The Hub Singapore, and welcome to the book launch of our wonderful, wonderful Anoja. Can we all call you by your first name? Yeah. We are so honored to have the author of Facing the Taliban and former UNICEF representative to Afghanistan, former ambassador of Sri Lanka to Bhutan, representative of Sri Lanka to Bhutan.
No, the UNICEF
representative to Bhutan, and many other. Thanks so much. Many other impressive accolades behind an amazing woman, mother, wife, aid worker, entrepreneur, I think, behind her. And we're so honored to have her here in person. She launched this book in Sri Lanka on September 6th. So that's about 2 months ago. And she has done book launches in New York and in London in the House of Lords. I'm like, in the House of Lords? What's she doing here in the Hub? But nevertheless, we're so honored to have you. Anoja is actually the mom of Chris's wife.
Yes.
Yay! So it's Chris's mother-in-law. You've got big shoes to fill. And she's here for a couple of weeks, and she has joined us in the fundraiser with Elvis as well last Friday. And today it's a bit more serious. We are going to start with a presentation by Anoja, and we're going to open the floor up to questions from all of you. But just a little bit more about her. Anoja spent 4 years in Afghanistan during the rule of the Taliban. She was actually an experiment done by the UNICEF. The Afghans actually has banned all form of women employment. And she is the first woman to be sent there to work alongside the Taliban in Jalalabad, running a team of 125 people and being really the only woman alongside the men. And I think, and my hypothesis is that, she brings that deep knowledge and deep diplomacy skills for sure, but I also think that she brings that level of parity of respect and innocence and, non-judgmental in between people and between tribes, and I think that's how she got to be a human to the Taliban, and in return they became they show their humanity back as well. I've read up about you, and in the Sunday Times, the first line that you told the reporter was that during the orientation of the job, Anoja was asked to write her will. And I have a big question from there, like when you went into there across the borders, did you ever think that you will come back out alive, right? And then the whole Twin Towers bombing happened, and your brother was in the towers. I'm not going to steal all your punchlines, but it's just a fascinating, dramatic, but also humorous kind of story in this book. And I think we've got a couple for sale tonight. It is normally $30 on Amazon, but Hubbers and Friends discount is 20 Singapore dollars for today, and you get an autograph from her. I've already got mine as a Christmas present from Chris, all the way from Sri Lanka, and I'm on it. I'm reading it up. I haven't completed it, I must confess, but I'm on it. So yeah, without much ado, I'd like to, it's my pleasure to welcome you to speak to us.
Thank you very much, Grace. I'm sure I don't deserve any of those compliments you did. Let me first put on my spectacles. So, regarding today's event, I'd like to express my profound gratitude to Grace Sai for her support and for chairing this book launch. It is an honor and privilege to have this event here at the Hub. And talking of the Hub, for those of you who are not familiar with the objectives of the Hub and what happens here, I would just like to mention that the Hub, as you know, is an incubator for social entrepreneurship. I like to think of it as a focal point for promoting and fostering business with a heart or you might call it profit with a social purpose. So it is inspiring that Grace Sai, who has been a co-founder and driving force behind the hub, which started about 9 years ago, is here with us today. And thank you very much, Grace. You've done fantastic things. And when Chris told me all about the ventures you've been involved in and also co-founding the hub, I thought you must be an old lady like me. And I was staggered to hear that you are just 30 years old. So I think what you have accomplished in this short space of time is absolutely impressive. And thank you very much for being here today and for your introduction. I would also like to express my grateful thanks to Chris and Samanthi for organizing and hosting this event. And you will, I'm sure, partake of some refreshments which have been provided with the compliments of Chris's Cafe. And thank you to all the others who have helped. And many thanks to all of you who are present here today. So welcome to the hub and thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this evening. I would like to start by taking a look at the cover page, and actually the cover page, which I could get back to, is a charcoal drawing by Sabini Abesinger. She's my niece, and she has captured a paradox, the ruthlessness of the Taliban as well as the good looks of the Afghans. And let's just take a look at this cover page. Now, as you can see, this is supposed to be the face of a Taliban. And you can see there a certain expression as well as the good looks. But if you look a little further, you can also ponder as to why he has that expression. Is it because of the devastation and destruction he sees all around him? Or is it because of his frustration of having become an orphan because his parents were killed in some rocket attack, and then he was forcibly recruited into a madrasa from which he became a child soldier of the Taliban. So I think when we look at the face of a Taliban, it's important to think that this is also a human being. And that is what I saw in Afghanistan. So anyway, about the book, I mean, in my presentation today, I'm not going to give you a summary of the book, because then it will make it so boring for you to read it. And I'm just going to give you a little introduction to Afghanistan and some glimpses into the book, and why I wrote the book, and why I called it Facing the Taliban. So let's start with a little bit about Afghanistan. Now, as you can see, it's a part of South Asia, and recently it became a part of the South Asian grouping of countries, which is called SAARC, the South Asian Regional Group. And it is a country with an ancient and rich history that borders 7 countries. Now, if you look at Afghanistan, to the west of Afghanistan is Iran, then there is Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. Sorry, this is Uzbekistan, and this is Tajikistan, and this is Kyrgyzstan, and then Pakistan, and here we have Tibet, which is of course now referred to as China. And so it's bordered by 7 countries. And therefore, Afghanistan has a racial mix. It's mixed with all of these bordering countries. And so to the west you will find people with an Iranian influence mixed with the Iranians. Then to the north you find the Tajiks, the Turkmens, the Uzbeks, and the Kyrgyz to the north. And then, of course, to the west is Pakistan, where the influence has been very strong. And actually, if you look at the Taliban, they have a lot of links with Pakistan, because many of the people who joined the Taliban were actually refugees who went to Pakistan, and then they were recruited into the madrasas in Pakistan, and then they joined the Taliban. Now, in early times, Afghanistan was a Buddhist country, and it was a high point on the ancient Silk Route. And later, it became a part of the Mughal Empire. And within Afghanistan, actually, the concept of nationhood is fractured because of the fact that there are all these different ethnic groups, and they have greater loyalties to their own warlord, their own regional warlord, than the country as such. But it's important to understand that no invader was able to hold Afghanistan, starting from Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, and then the British. Now, what happens when there's an invasion is that all of these different groupings who have their regional loyalties, they all come together to fight the common enemy. So the British invaded Afghanistan in 1832, and the result of that invasion is depicted in this painting by Lady Elizabeth Butler. This is the result of the British invasion of Kabul in the 19th century. And this painting, which is where the copyright is actually held by the Tate Gallery of London. I had to get the copyright from them. It's called Remnants of an Army, and it shows this person. He is the survivor of a 16,000 strong army that was sent to Kabul. And this picture shows this person. He's called Dr. Bryden, returning on his dying horse to Jalalabad. Now, there's a very famous saying that those who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. And this repetition of history took place in 1979 when Russia invaded Afghanistan. And as you know, to defeat the Russians, the US supported the Mujahideen. And the Mujahideen were actually these warlords and their supporters, who formed sort of a motley band of fighters who fought the Russians, and they were supported by the US. And the result was a proxy war of unimaginable ferocity. The defeat of the Russians was the first calamity that was followed by a series of events that finally led to the collapse of the USSR. But the Afghans paid the heaviest price. 2 million Afghans died, 2 million lost their limbs, 800,000 became widows, and Afghanistan as a country was decimated and its people reduced to abject poverty. Now, this is what I beheld when I went to Afghanistan in 1997, when the government was controlled by the Taliban. And when I went to Afghanistan, as a UN aid worker, I was with UNICEF. It was a non-family duty station because it was considered to be one of the most unsafe places. And so as a result, the country office was not in Afghanistan. We were inside Afghanistan, but the country office was in Pakistan. And it was a non-family duty station, and none of my family members were able to visit me there. And when I went, I received a package package of instructions from UNICEF headquarters in New York, and one of the instructions was that I should write my last will, which Grace referred to. So actually for me, writing my last will was a very good exercise because it helped me to orientate my mind to the reality of what I was going to face in Afghanistan. And I thought, okay, well, I mean, if I have to die in Afghanistan, probably it is a better way to die than to be killed in a road accident, or to die of some incurable disease, or to die of old age. So I had sort of made up my mind that, okay, the risk is there, but when I went to Afghanistan, actually I found that the situation was quite okay. But during the time I was there, there were 3 UN staff members who were killed. And so there were security incidents like that. But by and large, I did not feel a kind of daily threat. There were occasions where I had to face some serious situations, but it was not a kind of a daily situation. So we were able to get on with our work as a result of that. And I was the head of a sub-office in Jalalabad and then Kabul. And because of the ban on female employment and girls' education, no women were allowed to work. So actually I was the head of an office where the staff were all Afghan males. They were males with long beards because there was a rule saying that every man has to grow his beard, and that man should not touch the beard because the beard belongs to God. So I had this staff of long bearded men, not like the smart beard you have, but long, unruly kind of beards. And
like the sadhus in India.
Right, that's right. So, and of course I had to have daily encounters with the Taliban in order to facilitate UNICEF programs, because as a UN organization, our mandate is that we have to work through the government. So every single day I had to have meetings with the Taliban in order to get their commitment to implement UNICEF programs. And UNICEF programs were all for women and children. And the word woman was something, quite abhorrent to them. But I mean, I thought to myself when I went there, I mean, how can I relate to these people, I have nothing in common with the Taliban, and actually I oppose everything that they support. So I thought, how can I relate to these people? But at the end of the day, I thought, okay, I'm a human being, they are human beings, and so I related to them as one human being to another. And then as time went on, that approach helped to break down the barriers. And also I followed the motto of give respect to get respect. And then, as I said, I was the head of an all-male office, but I found that the staff were very professional and efficient. And also they were real gentlemen. I mean, this picture shows, that was on International Women's Day, which is on the 8th of March. And these were security guards of our office. Of course, they were unarmed. They had collected all these flowers and made up a bouquet, and they presented it to me when I came to office that morning. And I thought it's so charming of these people to do such a thing, or even to think of such a thing. So they were like that. They were absolute gentlemen and really charming. And of course the situation of women was really bad, because every single woman was forced to wear this garment, which was called the shuttlecock burqa. Shuttlecock because it's like a shuttlecock turned upside down. And they had to wear this garment, and even if they lifted the garment to scratch their arm, they could get beaten. And then the situation of children was very bad. Now this child, his name was Layak. He walked to school one morning and his hat blew off, and he ran into the field to pick up his hat. he stepped on a landmine. And then he was thrown, about 20, 30 feet up, he said. And when he landed, he found that his leg was just a piece of bone, which was shaking. And then he related this story to us. And he said that after that he passed out. And then the next thing he saw was his uncle crying in front of him. And he said to his uncle, "Don't cry, I'm okay." He was just 5 years old. So this was just one of the hundreds of children who were the innocent victims of landmines. And not a single landmine was produced in Afghanistan. And so, as you know, in the 1990s, there was this movement to ban landmines. And I think you're all familiar with the knowledge that Princess Diana led that campaign. But still, there are landmines. And even today, there are children stepping on these landmines. And of course, when I was there, poppy cultivation was rife. And Afghanistan was the largest poppy growing country in the world at the time. I mean, the flowers were absolutely magnificent. In the summer, entire fields were covered in these blooms, and it was stunningly beautiful. But then, the deadly harvest is what resulted in so much of heartache, illness and death in many other countries. And this shows a picture of a person lancing the pod. Actually, I took this photograph. All these photographs were taken by me. So it was all out in the open. Nobody was hiding anything. Poppy cultivation was going on everywhere. And there was a United Nations program, the United Nations organization to eliminate drug production. And they would stop poppy cultivation in one place, but then next year there would be like 20 other places where poppy cultivation came up. So it was a really thankless task trying to stop poppy cultivation. But the thing to understand is that farmers took to poppy cultivation not because they wanted to, but because poppy was a dry crop which could be grown without irrigation. And their irrigation networks were all destroyed in the war, and nothing was done to restore those systems. And so they, in order to survive, they took to poppy cultivation. And I heard an anecdote when I was there that an American reporter came and interviewed a poppy farmer and asked him, "Why are you growing poppy?" So the poppy farmer said, "Well, you have supplied us with $60 billion worth of weapons, and this is our way of showing gratitude." So, when it comes to facing the Taliban, I mean, I saw a ferocious face like this. And that was the face I first encountered. But then subsequently, now these are two Taliban people. This is the regional director, this is the provincial director for health services for Lagman province, and this is the director of agriculture. Now, UNICEF has a sort of, we have a kind of, every year we go on a staff picnic. And so although our staff were all males, they said, "Why can't we organize a picnic?" I said, "Fine, let's organize a picnic." And on the day of the picnic, one staff member came and said, "The Taliban wants to join our picnic." So I said, "Well, the last thing I bargained for is to go on a picnic with the Taliban." But anyway, I said, "We have nothing to hide. We are a transparent organization, and if they're so curious to see what we are doing on our picnic, let them join us, but because we have no choice anyway." But I said, they can't stifle our activities. They can't destroy our cameras, and they can't stop our games and other things we are doing on the picnic. So these two people came, but they enjoyed the picnic. So that's what it was like. Now, I'm not going to, as I said, give you a synopsis of the book. The book starts with the destruction of the Twin Towers of New York, and the strange thing was that my brother was on the 74th floor of the North Building when it happened, and he was one of the last to escape. This is my brother in the middle. And that very night, the Northern Alliance started bombing Kabul, and so we were evacuated the next day, and then this picture shows me together with my other colleagues being evacuated from Kabul. And it's a strange quirk of fate that both these pictures appeared in various newspapers all over the world, including the New York Times. And the book ends with the destruction of what I call the Twin Towers of Afghanistan. The Twin Towers of Afghanistan were the two Burmese Buddha statues. Now, these Burmese Buddha statues were the wonder of the world because they were so gigantic, and it took something like 100 years to carve these statues. And when I was working in the Kabul office, Burmese came under our office, and I visited the place twice, and just the foot of the Buddha statue was taller than the ceiling, just the foot. So you can imagine how gigantic that was. And so the destruction was carried out actually not by the Taliban, but by the Al-Qaeda. When the Taliban was sent there, they said this is a part, they were Afghans, and they said this is a part of our heritage and we can't destroy this. And they disappeared. So then a group of Al-Qaeda people had to be sent, and it took them something like 1 week to destroy the statues because they had to take lorry loads of dynamite in order to destroy the statues. And actually the Afghans were crying. I mean, some Afghans came and told me, the Taliban has destroyed our future. Now they have destroyed our past, and we have nothing left. And some Taliban people came, and they apologized to me. They said, although we are the Taliban, many of us were opposed to this. So you can see that the Taliban is not a homogeneous organization. There were quite a lot of liberal people even within the Taliban. And I wrote this book because being in Afghanistan for 4 years was a kind of a life-changing experience, and I learned several lessons. One of the lessons I learned was the universality and meaning of suffering, because I have never seen or experienced so much suffering in my life, because absolutely every Afghan had experienced multiple tragedies. I mean, if we experience one of those things, we'll think that, our life has come to an end. But they were facing multiple tragedies, and it was going on and on. And therefore, I realized the insignificance of one's own suffering. And another lesson I learned is that there are no victors in war. There are only victims. And here I'd just like to touch on what has happened with the British forces in Afghanistan. I think you may have seen that panorama program recently, where they showed that in 2012, more British soldiers returning from Afghanistan committed suicide due to post-traumatic stress disorders than the number that were killed in Afghanistan. So they came back, and the image that was portrayed to the world was that they have been successful, that they have been victorious in achieving their objectives. But this is the reality. And also I learned the meaning of gratitude, because all around me there were all these limbless people, limbless children, limbless adults, hobbling on crutches everywhere. And I thought to myself, forget about all these luxuries that we take for granted. Forget about food even. Forget about shelter. Forget about the basic necessities, which are food, shelter, medicine and clothing. These are the necessities of life. Forget about any of those things. But if you just have your 2 arms and your 2 legs, you are extremely fortunate. So I felt extremely privileged and grateful that I just had my 2 arms and 2 legs. And the reason I wrote the book is that what I saw and experienced changed my life forever. And therefore, when I related my stories to people, they said, you must write the book. So actually, I'm like the ancient mariner in Samuel Coleridge's famous poem, The Ancient Mariner, if you have read it. I think in school everybody learns that poem. The ancient mariner went on a sea voyage, and that changed his life. And then when he came back, he was a gnarled old man like me. I'm a gnarled old woman, and I want to share my story with others. The ancient mariner had to grip somebody with his hand, and then he would relate his story. And then the poem is about how he stopped a wedding guest and narrated his story. And at the end of his narration, the wedding was over, but he managed to narrate his story. So obviously I can't stop each person on the road and narrate my story, so I've written a book. And so I'm like the ancient mariner. And of course, the rest is up to you. I hope you enjoy reading the book as much as I enjoy writing it. And I must say that although I've been touching on the more tragic aspects of the book, there are a lot of humorous stories pertaining to the Taliban and their weird rules, and how people, manage to live with these rules and also sometimes outsmart the Taliban. And I have a little anecdote. I'm not going to relate to you what the anecdote is, but I call it Man Smart, Woman Smart. Harry Belafonte's famous song. And so, thank you, and Dera Manana Tashako, which is in the local language. I hope you enjoy reading the book.
If you're hungry or not, I'm kidding. And just pose the question. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kiralee. I'm from Singapore. I don't need the microphone.
So I think it's good if everybody listens.
Did you say you were there for 4 years consecutively? Because you said you worked in a fairly male-dominated environment, did you miss female company? And also, while you were there for that period of time, did you ever have periods of loneliness? And also, how old were your children when you were over there?
Good questions. So, I must explain the background. Actually, when I was sent to Afghanistan, it was an experiment, UNICEF, of sending a woman to head an all-male office. So when I went there, now they sent me there because the UNICEF programs are for women and children. But if they sent a man there, that man has no access to women. The man is prohibited from having any kind of interaction with women. So as a woman, I was able to interact with Afghan women. So I was, inside women's compounds, and they would be coming, they would take risks sometimes to come and meet me in order to narrate their stories, in order to explain their problems and so on. So I was in touch with women all the time. And I became like a bridge between women and men. I could go to a men's meeting, I could go to a women's meeting. So I did not lack female company because the women were very keen to see me, and I was also interacting with them daily to implement our programs as well as to ascertain the situation. Now, with regard to my children, actually, when I went to Afghanistan, my elder daughter Saman, she was already at university, and my younger daughter Rue, she was 14 years old, and so she agreed to go to a boarding school at the age of 14. I mean, I felt 14 was rather young, but then in the boarding school environment, I thought she would be better off than any other sort of arrangement. So certainly it is a difficult thing for a mother. And I must share this with you because my daughter is here and she will maybe tell you the same thing when you speak to her. I spoke to my children, off and on, and I because as a mother you always feel guilty that you left your children and that you are not being a good mother and so on. It kind of always has an impact on you. So I asked my children, would you have preferred if I was a stay-at-home mother and didn't go to work and looked after, devoted my entire time to you? And both my children, with one voice, they said absolutely not. They said that they would not have it any other way. So that was the endorsement I got from my children. But as I said, I don't think I would have gone to Afghanistan when the children were small. So I waited until my youngest daughter was 14.
Yeah, I can speak just like that. Okay. Hi, my name is Saurabh. I run a small company which is, I would say, primarily into women empowerment because we give financial access to people and 98% of our recipients are women. I just want to understand your thoughts and what did you understand from the Taliban living there, that when we talk about women employment and people here and myself, we get very strong reactions like how can they ban women education, how can they ban women empowerment, because we come from a very different school of thought and the way we have been brought up. Did you get any insights into why the Taliban believed in women not going to schools, not getting educated, not getting employed? What was their thought process in doing this? And what something which probably the Western media never shares with us, and we only see the Malala Yousafzais, but we don't see the other women who get bombed by the US drones. But anyway, can you just share it?
So actually, I think it is something that comes from fundamentalist dogma. And it's a kind of a male-dominated fundamentalist dogma that has been perpetrated in very conservative societies. Because actually, even among the Taliban, there were people, once I was there for some time, there were Taliban people who came to me and said, we think girls' education is important. And there was a Taliban regional director of education who said, we can even start formal schools for girls in his area. Of course, later he came to my office and he said, please make sure my bosses don't know anything about this. I said, don't worry, I don't share information with your bosses. Can be sure of that. So there were Taliban people themselves who thought that these rules were weird. So it was some kind of fundamentalist dogma which was being perpetrated in order to control the population. Because they had various rules for men as well. And this was their way of controlling the population. And also something that I understood when I was there was that Afghan women are very strong. And had they been allowed to educate themselves and get into the world of employment, I'm sure they would have done extremely well. And they would have been a kind of threat to some men who think like that. I mean, most men don't think like that, but some men would regard that as a threat to their own careers and so on. So they just wanted to subjugate women. And of course I formulate my own theories, I mean they're my own theories. But they had this rule that you can have 4 wives. right? Now, do you think an educated woman would subscribe to the idea that I'm going to be one of 4 wives? I don't think so. But an illiterate girl who is married off at the age of 12, she has no choice. So then it just becomes part of the 4-wife saga. So I think, all of that factored into it. But as I said, there were educated Talibs who didn't subscribe to those things, thankfully. And I think it's important to actually negotiate with those people and try to kind of bring out that element, because it's not one homogeneous organization.
Was there respect for women in general? Apart from not giving them jobs and not giving education?
Well, within the home, now I visited lots of Afghan homes. Now inside the household, and there are sort of an extended household, extended family situation where there are many families. Now within the family environment, women are respected, And as I said, Afghans are very charming people. Men are extremely charming, and they're charming to their wives. So I think within the family setup, they were okay. But at the same time, in some rural communities, when men get together, they have a go at the women, and they were talking about maternal deaths, and they were laughing. So I said, "Oh, why are you laughing?" They said, "Oh, last year 7 women died in our village due to childbirth." So I said, "What's funny about that?" So I couldn't understand that phenomenon. But as I said, within the family, women were respected.
If it's okay, Sam, can we get you up here? So, sorry to put you on this, only if you don't mind. But Sam is the daughter, and I really, my question for you is, during those years when your mom was in Afghanistan, were you fearful? Were you in awe? Were you, and what is the impact of her own journey onto your life?
Thanks, Grace. I think we had been quite used to my mother travelling and working when she went to Afghanistan, because she worked in Sri Lanka for a long time and in some very dangerous areas that were under terrorist control at that time, because there was civil war in Sri Lanka. So we were used to her being in and also travelling to other countries through for shorter stints of time. So it was something that we were sort of used to, that she worked, and that sometimes that they were dangerous situations. But I think because she talked about it, I don't have a memory of feeling scared. I don't have a memory of thinking, "Oh, I'm worried about her." I did, particularly when there was bombing there, or she'd be calling us from a bunker or a satellite phone, then yes, it sort of would occur to you. But I think my sister and I didn't have that as an overriding feeling, or even a strong feeling at all. And in terms of the impact, well, Mama said that when she's asked us before, did we not want her to go? When she asked us, we said, of course, there's no question, of course you have to go. And certainly the impact on me, it might not be obvious, but my mother is a very strong inspiration to me and to my sister. And she and my father have always taught us this concept of the oneness of man. I also feel very strongly about the role models that people set for their children. And I see my mother as an individual as well as being a mother and a wife and a daughter. And I think that's something that I noticed with some friends I have, where they might not have had that. They have a very different perception of their mothers as opposed to their fathers. And I think in society in general, sometimes there's a perception of women not as an individual standing on their own 2 feet and in their own right. And I don't mean any offence to anybody who is like that or who has been brought up in that way, but for me it's a really important factor that I have a mother who has a job and who earned money and who also did this type of job and helped other people. And I have friends whose parents have travelled and lived all over the world, and I think maybe it depends on your personality as well. There are people who've said to me, oh, I couldn't bear moving around, or I couldn't bear having my parents live away, but for me it was always a benefit. I've never felt anything other than that.
Thank you. Can we just like clap for their entire family? Yeah, sense a lot of admiration and respect going on there. Cool. Yeah, any more questions? Is there time to, anyone curious about, how big the Taliban is and how do they do recruitment and what's their mission? No? Is it maybe okay? Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name is Satya. I work upstairs, one of the companies at the hub. So everybody knows there's a lot of inhumane stuff going on in Afghanistan. But if you could just pick a memory from the top of your head, what's the most humane thing you saw, or what made you think like, oh, that's so sweet, or like warm and fuzzy, or makes you feel like, okay, there are people in Afghanistan who are really good at heart of that. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, amidst all this destruction and all these sort of terrible things, people are the same. I mean, they care for their children very much. And now, if you look at it from a UNICEF perspective, now UNICEF was concerned with malnutrition in many countries. And the malnutrition levels are very high in some countries. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but in India, the malnutrition rate is something like 49%. So it's very high. Now in Afghanistan, the malnutrition rate was low. Now despite the fact that people, the parents, had such difficulty obtaining food, they made sure the children had good nutrition. And they cared for the children. So I think that was something really nice to see. And of course, acts of kindness were there, everywhere to see. Because by and large, I would say that Afghans are some of the most charming, hospitable people I have ever met. And that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, because the world thinks that they are ferocious warlords and that they are, barbarians. But that's not true. So, when it comes to kindness and all of those things, I think they're right on top with everybody else.
Just a question on the Taliban. They make up what, 1%? Perhaps 1% of the entire population of 20 million, right? So, who are the rest of the Afghans? What do they perceive of the Taliban, and do they not revolt? I mean, do they respect, or do they just coexist in fear?
So actually, it's a strange thing, because now in conservative Afghanistan, that is in the rural areas, people follow these rules, like women wear the burqa, women don't go to work, and then they are not so keen on educating their children, and they think the best thing they can do for their daughter is to get them married quickly to some rich man if possible. So their perceptions are very different. So for them, the Taliban is not anything very strange in those very conservative communities. But among the educated people, particularly the educated women, they thought the Taliban are absolutely weird. And they said this is ridiculous, these rules and regulations that they have imposed on us. So I think looking at Afghanistan as a whole, the country never had a national system of education. So the people in urban areas were educated and they were liberal and so on, but the people in the rural areas were illiterate. Now, for instance, I'll quote you a figure. The level of female literacy in rural Afghanistan was just 4%. So you can imagine. So steeped in illiteracy and surrounded by conservatism, for them the Taliban was just nothing very strange. Although the people who call themselves the Taliban were just 1%. But most of the other people want to get on with their lives. I mean, if they're farmers, they want to get on with their cultivation, they want to lead a normal life. But it is the cultural dimension that gives Taliban support in rural areas, where the people follow those rules as a matter of cultural practice.
Anyone else? If not, we're happy to also just mingle and have one-on-one chats and get your books autographed.